Commentator Scott Ried is standing by, a man with a lot of experience in politics, and he's kind of laughing too. You got to give them credit, Scott, for doing this, taking part in it. It's important for our democracy to see them there as well. It's also the first time we've ever seen something like this.
I'm sorry, Todd. I can see that you're speaking to me, but I can't hear you. Are you muted? That's a joke. That's just a joke. Look, I think what it tells us is that people who said, oh, we can't possibly do this, it's terrible, we need to meet in person, we've shown that it can work. I'm not convinced that we've shown that this is how it ought to work. I mean, as an emergency substitute, great. As a permanent solution, not so great. So, you know, it was interesting to watch. It was like watching a great big kind of online experiment. But this is not the way Parliament should function. I'm glad that we haven't seen a bunch of people clamoring to say, okay, that's it. Let's get rid of the buildings, burn them all down, and let's just do this thing through the computer screen, because it was not as good.
You know, here's something else, too, and I know you're very keen when it comes to observing, you know, the optics of politics, too. So I wonder whether this helps to humanize the politicians.
Well, we're all looking behind them and saying, hey, what's that junk? Like, you look behind me, like you, I'm a comic book nerd. You're going to pick that up. People are looking, they're saying, hey, check out Navdeep Bains, man. He's got some killer art there. Turban on his head, like looking cool. Andrew Scheer's little drab there, you know. So we're all, it's COVID couture. We're all going to review the workplaces, the online workplaces of our MPs and try to get a hint of what it says about them. For sure, everyone's doing that.
I see you have copies of Daredevil and the Incredible Hulk behind you, too.
Incredible Hulk #1 is hard to come by, because they didn't print very many of them, and the Hulk is gray, not green, in issue #1.
Okay, do you think we're going to see Parliament moving forward with this? Because, you know, we don't know how long this is going to last here. So, you know, next week is May, at the end of this week is May, and then, you know, how does this play out now into June? And, you know, then there's the summer. I mean, what do you think?
I think we can play this thing forward for a short period of time if we need to, and by a short period, I mean a handful of months. We're going to have Parliament. I think it's going to meet. There'll be a small in-person meeting tomorrow so that we can have actual votes. That ought to be done in person. But we also ought to limit it as much as possible until we do get fully reopened. And so I think what we saw today, I'll go back to it. From my perspective, what we saw today told us it can work. It didn't tell us it ought to work, because it's not even remotely a satisfactory substitute on a permanent basis.
Yeah, you can't run a government this way. You can't run a country this way, is what you're saying.
No, it's, you know, people are clicking buttons and looking around. And, you know, one thing it does is you notice there's no heckling, right? So, you know, it takes away some of the informality in ways that are both good and bad. And so we saw that. So you don't see the heckling, you don't see the goofiness, you don't see the abject partisanship, because it sounds weird, it translates weird in this environment. But on the other hand, you don't see people sitting behind the curtain having a cup of coffee from different walks of life and from different parties, getting together, working together, which I think is an important part of the real functioning Parliament.
CTV News political commentator Scott Ried joining us. Thank you for this. You can now mute your microphone, Scott.
Thank you, Todd. I'll just take a couple of minutes to find that proper button.
Okay, as we can